My name's Galen Moffett, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Lineagen. I've been at Lineagen for 2 years. I came to Lineagen from my own consulting company. I had worked previously with some of the people here, and I was brought here primarily to take a concept and turn it into a business that actually produced a product that we could sell in the marketplace. And we worked producing product and systems and the underlying websites and supporting materials so that when Bert came, that he would have something first rate to sell. And that's when we produced what we call First Step, which is our product. First Step is a very unique product in the market. It's what makes it unique is that it's a combination of two tests, Fragile X and chromosomal microarray, and the test is bundled, and then it has a service layer built around it. So what we're able to do is to take this product and use it with pediatricians and with other physicians who maybe don't have a completely full understanding of the genetics of autism or developmental delay, and by providing this service for them, we are able to act as their subject matter experts in this very complicated field. And so we've assembled a team of, medical genetic counselors who talk with the doctors and with usually the parents of our patients to help them understand the role of genetics in autism and developmental delay, and also to help them go through how this might be impacting their family and the situation that they find themselves in. One of the things that makes it particularly unique and that we're very happy about is how simple it is. And if you don't mind, I'll just take this apart a little bit. But the big innovation in First Step buckle is that what we're able to do now is to collect the child's DNA with what's called a buccal swab. And before this, children had their DNA collected with a blood draw. And many of these children that are affected with these situations, taking a blood draw is very traumatic for them. And we've actually heard stories of moms having their nose broke by the kid rearing back in the chair as they stick them with the needle. And so for us to find a non-intrusive way that parents and the child could have their sample taken by just swabbing the inside of their cheeks, it would really take a lot of that trauma out of the situation. So we did develop First Step buckle, and we introduced it to the market. It's been received with a great success, and if you couple that with our service package that we put around this product with our genetic counseling, it's just turning out to be a wonderful product for people. And every day we touch the lives of children and their families, and this, sometimes we're able to give them information that will actually help them change their clinical management and result in a better life for them and for their children. So I'll tell you a little bit about how the product actually flows and how we get it out to the doctors. So we assemble all of our kits here. We maintain the inventory here. We will do all of our inventory management and product preparation here. This is the actual kit that will go out to the doctor, and our salespeople will, when they make a sales call, one of the things that they're encouraged to do is to leave a kit or two with the physician. When the physician sees the child and they think they're the right kind of candidate for this test, then all the doctor has to do is really fill out a very simple requisition. We tried to make it simple because medical papers can become so complicated. The blue part is the physician's information. The green part is the patient's information. And they just fill out this paperwork, take a swab, put it back in the kit. Included in every kit is complete mailing instructions included up in the top of the kit. They then can take the swab, put it in the biological bag, put that all back together in the box, and then put it in this FedEx mailer that's pre-addressed that they just call and schedule. We'll schedule the FedEx pickup for them. FedEx will come pick it up, we track it, and then it arrives at our office. Here, we'll take the FedEx, open it up, and do what we call accessioning and verification of the kit. The accessioning and verification are the ways that we maintain the chain of custodies to make sure that we always have the right sample with the right child. And once we've done the accessioning and verification here, accessioning and verification has to be separated by time, space, and person. So we have two people that do that work. Once they've accessioned and verified the sample, then the sample is put in a container and it goes to one of our contracted laboratories. At the laboratory, they do the chromosomal microarray and the Fragile X, and they produce what we call a cytogenetic technical report. So they'll run the actual assays at the lab, and then each of the labs has a lab director that's called a cytogeneticist. The cytogeneticist will read the information from the microarray and from the Fragile X, and they will write for us what's called a technical report. And it's just what do they find on the chromosomal microarray? Do they find deletions? Do they find duplications? Do they find variances in SNPs? And they'll write that to us in a technical report. Should mention, and Alex can talk about this later, but we have the highest resolution chip clinically available. Our chip contains 2.7 million probes, which is a huge, dense look at the makeup of a human's genetics. So once we get that technical report back here, our genetic counselors will prepare a report and individualize that report for each of the patients. Now, I should say that when we receive this kit in our office, one of the first things that we do is our inside sales and customer support people will call the parent directly. They verify it, that all the information is correct, that the child's name is spelled correct, the birth date, all the information is correct. And they will actually establish a relationship with the parent. And we do that for a couple of reasons. We do that, number one, so that we can make sure our information is correct, that we can build a personal relationship. We also need a couple of things from that parent. We need their release for medical information from their doctor, and we need a release so that we can represent them in an appeal with their insurance company if the insurance company doesn't pay immediately. So what we're trying to do then in that welcome call is make sure everything's correct and establish a relationship and gather the information we need. We then do that, we'll send them all the releases that we need through an email with a DocuSign, so we're able to do it very, very efficiently and with minimum intrusion for that parent. Also during that welcome call, we will ask them if they've had pre-test genetic counseling, and if they haven't, we will attempt to set up an appointment with them if they want to do it on the phone, or we've actually prepared a video of the pre-test genetic counseling session that they can go online and watch And then from there, they can ask questions in person of a genetic counselor if they want to do that. So then we've got the test in hand, we've got the patient and the insurance information in hand, and then we also then have the technical information from the laboratory in hand. The genetic counselors will use the information from the doctor, they'll use the information from the parents, they'll use the information from the laboratory to prepare an individualized technical report that takes this scientific speak and takes it into something that parents can really understand and that's helpful for them. Each of the binders that they produce is individualized to the particular patient, and so it'll individualize it to the patient and what was found about the genetic findings for that patient. We will prepare 2 of those binders to send to the doctor. One is for the doctor's reference and one is for the patient's reference. We've put them in a really nice 3-ring binder so that their parents can put information into the binder if they want. They can use it as a place to keep their records. And then once that goes to the doctor, oftentimes the doctor will sit down and talk a little bit about the results with the patient and then recommend that the patient set up a post-test genetic counseling session with one of our genetic counselors. The genetic counselors will then get on the phone with the parents, sometimes one, sometimes 2. Sometimes it'll be a call with the doctor and the parents together, so a conference call. So then they have the binder with them, and then our genetic counselors also have a copy of the binder, and they go through the binder step by step to make sure that the parent understands exactly what the results of the test were. Now, what this allows us to do is to create a very individualized, high-service, high-touch product in an environment that's pretty high-tech. And so when I try to describe this to people, I tell them it's high-tech and high-touch. We put those 2 things together so that parents can understand this in a way that's really meaningful for them and for their children. Tomorrow we have incredibly exciting things happening tomorrow. So tomorrow we have generation 2 of our product. Generation 2 takes this chip that's already the highest resolution chip clinically available, and we add to that chip proprietary information that we have, that we've licensed from the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia and from the University of Utah. And so this will put proprietary information on that chip that's not available on any other chip. And physicians will then be able to have a completely new insight into the genetic makeup and on these specific markers that have been associated with autism spectrum disorder. So that's going to be incredible. It's going to give people new information that they've never had before. Now, it'll take a while for the literature to now catch up with with what they're seeing, but this will give an absolute new look into the genetic material of those children. So it's really exciting. I think it puts us in an incredibly advantageous position in terms of the market, because we'll have something that nobody else has and that they can't get anywhere else. So it'll be very exciting.
Excellent.
Great.
Had you ever known any children with autism before you did this?
Yeah, well,
Hang on a second.
Yeah.
Because what I'd like to know is what it does for your heart and soul
Okay.
that you're
Yeah.
contributing to this.
So one of the reasons this is so meaningful to me personally is my old boss has a son that's exactly the same age as my son Ben, and his son Brian was the first child in Utah that was diagnosed with autism. He's now 36 years old. My son and he grew up together. My old boss told me that they spent their whole lives looking for the biological underpinnings of this, of autism that was impacting his son. And what we have here is the biological underpinnings of that. Not for everybody, but for many of these children, we can find those biological underpinnings. So highly important to me on a personal level. We see the kids that come in here, we talk to them. I come in here every Saturday. A session, and so that I'm dealing with this in the lab. I touch it. I know that when I'm touching this, I'm touching a family, and it's very, very meaningful to me on a personal level. Well, what we're finding is that, and the papers, the academic papers support this as well, is that when physicians do chromosomal microarray, it does make changes in clinical management for those children. And so, you know, how would this have affected Brian? It could have gone all the way from helping change his clinical management to, if this is done early enough on children and gives a specific genetic underpinning of autism, then children can get into intensive behavioral therapy much sooner. Right now, the average age of diagnosis is like 5.5 years old. And, but if the kids can get diagnosed, or if, in this case, if Brian could have been diagnosed at 1.5 years, his life would have been very different, because kids who have had this intense behavioral therapy, they can catch up to grade level, they can recover lost or IQ that they didn't have, and get back to a place where sometimes they're not even recognizable as having anything different going on with them than other children. And so this could have had a huge impact on Brian and his life. Now, it may not have had, but it could have had. So.
My name is Rena Vanzo. I'm the manager of the genetic counseling team here at Lineagen. There are 3 of us who are full-time genetic counselors here. We are licensed and certified, licensed in the state of Utah, and actually there are about 10 other states who require licensure as well. We do have that certification. And then also, all 3 of us are members of a professional society called the National Society of Genetic Counselors, and they collaborate with the American Board of Genetic Counseling to provide a certification exam. So every genetic counselor has to pass their board exam to be considered a competent genetic counselor. We also have about 3 consulting genetic counselors, so they will help for various items. If there's a genetic counseling policy we need to make and we need to bring in folks who have different experiences, maybe someone who works in a prenatal genetic setting, someone who works in adult or neurology genetic setting. So we have a variety of consultants who we can reach out to, who are trusted, who also have the certification and training that we do to make sure our families are receiving the best policies. I think it will first help to give you a little bit of background about the field of genetic counseling in general. We sort of classify ourselves into one of 2 buckets, a traditional genetic counselor role or a non-traditional genetic counselor role. The traditional role is what you might think of when you would see any specialty healthcare provider. You're going and meeting someone in person, you're sitting down with them to get the medical information and to have that referral. I always pictured myself as a traditional genetic counselor, meeting those kids, seeing those families in person and helping them. And that's what brought me to the state of Utah. I took my first job at the University of Utah and Primary Children's Medical Center. I was there for about 2.5 years, and I loved my job. I met probably 8 to 10 new families a week, all who had a child with some sort of a special healthcare need. And I loved the people I worked with. I mean, they were really nationally and even internationally renowned geneticists and genetic counselors. And while all of those things were working, while I felt really satisfied in those roles, I began to hear some of the same stories from families over and over, and they frustrated me in a way. In summary, what they would say is, I don't know what's going on with my child. We've been sent to see this genetics provider, and I don't know why. I'm not sure how this fits in. You know, what is the point of the genetics service? I'm worried that my child is having seizures or has a heart defect or has autism. You know, how does this fit in? And most of the time they're on a wait list to see that geneticist for several months. So that's a lot of time they aren't getting answers. And I just felt like there had to be a better way. And Lineagen provides that better way. What we do here is we reach out, we provide support and education, not only to the families, but to their primary healthcare providers so that they feel like they're getting more out of that genetic specialty visit. You know, what is the reason for it and how does it fit in with their child's day-to-day life? So a day in the life of a Lineagen genetic counselor, I mean, obviously it starts with walking through that door and I just feel an energy here all of the time. It just feels like everyone in this company is dedicated to helping families who have a child with autism spectrum disorder or delay. We all really care and we believe in this company's mission. And so that makes it easy in many respects. What I will typically do during the day is be on the phone with families whose doctor has suggested the First Step DX service for them. I will give the families some background information, starting with what in the world is a genetic test and why is it being done or being suggested for your child. I let them know what it involves, how long the process takes, the implications of the testing, and talk with them about their thoughts. You know, is this something that they feel is appropriate and desired for their child? We want the families to really feel like they're part of that decision-making process, and as genetic counselors we provide very client-centered care to them. You know, involve them in that decision, make sure they know why they're having a test done and what those results are possibly going to look like. I may also be on the phone with the ordering physician from that family who may ask me questions about what the discussion entailed with that family. You know, how was the family feeling emotionally? Were they ready to have this test at this time? Also, I may speak with a doctor before they recommend a certain family. You know, is this child appropriate for this test? I think there are a lot of primary care providers out there who graduated from their training programs before genetics was really on the radar. And with the Lineagen genetic counselors, they can pick up the phone and call us and, you know, be comfortable asking that question. Let me tell you about this child. What do you think? Is this the right test for this child? And given our professional ethics of the National Society of Genetic Counselors, we will provide really straightforward answers to them. You know, we won't do any inappropriate testing. We will make sure that the results of this testing are delivered in a way that's really sensitive and is helpful, is clinically actionable for the families. I also spend a lot of my time getting the result from the laboratory, which usually is probably a paragraph, several sentences about what was found, and it's all written in a lot of medical jargon. So myself and Mallory and Megan, the rest of the genetic counseling team, we will turn that paragraph into something that's accessible by the parents and the pediatricians who maybe don't have that genetics background. We really distill the complex genetic information into something that makes sense, that they can use and that they can understand. You know, people ask me all the time, what you do sounds so difficult. How do you do this? And it is really difficult information for families to hear. It's difficult for them to talk about, but I think that they feel comfortable with our model and with who we are as counselors. We really make an effort to build that rapport and get to know them. And some of the drawbacks of being in this non-traditional role is obviously that we can't see that family. I can't reach out and touch that mother's arm when she starts to cry. But what I can do is be there as a listening ear over the phone, and I think the phone model that we use really facilitates that in a lot of ways. Here you've got a mother and a father. Sometimes we're able to conference in grandparents if that's what they want. They can tell us when they want to have this conversation. Maybe after they've put the kids to bed, maybe after they've dropped the kids off at school in the morning. They can sit in their favorite recliner chair with a cup of coffee and have an honest conversation where they know someone isn't looking at them, possibly judging what they're saying. They really feel free to tell us things like, is this my fault? I feel like this could be my fault. In the world of autism spectrum disorder, that's something that many mothers were erroneously told, and I think that stigma has unfortunately persisted in a lot of ways. And even very rational parents who are highly educated still ask those questions or say, thank you for telling me I wasn't the reason that my child has autism. It helps to hear that from someone else. So I think we do get into some really sensitive conversations that don't happen as readily in person. Lineagen is the only company I'm aware of that involves these specific pieces of the integrated service. There are some genetic counselors out there who provide their services over the phone, but they may be linked to a specific clinic. There are also some laboratories who will bundle 2 or more genetic tests that are appropriate for a given patient population. But I don't know of anyone else who is really combining the 2 of them together, the bundling of the test with the genetic counseling. And also, as you may talk about with some others, we go above and beyond in the sense that we really take a lot off the physician's table as well. You know, pediatricians are incredibly busy healthcare providers. I think the average is they get 12 minutes with each child. And you know, if a doctor is going to focus on really high quality care for that child, it's difficult for them to talk about billing and paperwork. And Lineagen takes care of those things so the doctor can focus on the patient. So we are the only company I know of that's providing that entire suite of services. The Lineagen First Step DX integrated service really includes 3 main components: genetic testing, genetic counseling, and comprehensive reporting. So this is the Lineagen result binder. It's, as you can see, it's pretty substantial. It has about 10 different sections and about 50 pages altogether. So it is quite an extensive piece of work. And in my mind, this represents a number of things. It represents the investment that the family has taken in their child's health care. Genetic testing is something that is very important for children with autism spectrum disorder and delay, and the results of this are going to be meaningful for many, many years to come. It also represents that the family has taken a step. They've taken control in some way. They've been a partner in their child's health care, and they're helping make the decisions that are going to hopefully change their child's medical management and improve his or her quality of life. And so many times I'll talk to a family who's had genetic testing in the past and they don't remember what was done and they don't know quite the details of those results. And so when we send this binder, we know we're sending them something that they're going to understand, that's going to mean something to them for years to come. So just to kind of give you an overview of what's in this binder, we have a physician results section that really includes the meat and potatoes that comes from the laboratory itself. It is, again, written in medical jargon. This is something that the that the physician would expect to see when ordering a genetic test. However, the remainder of the binder is written specifically for families and for physicians who lack that genetic training. We break it down into sections. So, for instance, what is Fragile X syndrome? How did this happen? Can this happen again? Who else should be tested? So we really write the sections keeping in mind questions that families would have if a child had this particular diagnosis. Then we also have an entire section that has pictures we've developed here in-house. You know, genetic testing is a very complex science. And when I'm on the phone with a family, I may say, let's turn to page 27 in your result binder. Let's look at this picture together. And I think that really helps solidify some of the more complex genetics topics. It also is one way to help us get around some of the barriers that come from a non-traditional model. If I was with a family in clinic face to face, I might pull out a piece of paper and start drawing something for a parent. But I don't have that luxury over the phone, but if I've already sent the family a binder with the pictures that I think I'm likely to use, we can use this as a tool to really help with that education piece. There's also a lot of information regarding support systems, different groups that are devoted to maybe autism, maybe a specific diagnosis that's come from our testing. We want to let the families know that there are others out there who've walked in their shoes that they can contact on a long-term basis. The future of Lineagen is something that excites me tremendously. It's going to give at least the genetic counseling team the opportunity to reach out and network with others who are among our professional society. We actually have a lot of people contacting us, coming up to us at conferences who are very interested in this model, in this non-traditional counseling model. So I'm already looking forward to meeting those new colleagues. Another thing that really excites me about the future of this company is the fact that we have a role in some ongoing research. We're hoping to expand what the entire medical community knows about genetics in autism and developmental delay. And because our testing is going to continue to improve, there are going to be many other specialists who are interested in this type of testing that maybe currently isn't routinely using a chromosomal microarray test. So, for example, we have a lot of ordering pediatricians. We've started to see neurologists grow in their interest in this area. A lot of kids will see neurologists for seizures, but also for autism spectrum disorder and maybe for both things. So we're starting to see new specialists pop up all the time, and I think that will only continue to grow.
My name is Steve Prescott. I'm a physician and scientist, spent most of my career in science, actually, medical research, trying to uncover the causes of disease. And I'm the president of the Oklahoma Medical Research Foundation, which of course works broadly in trying to understand different diseases, heart disease, arthritis, cancer, neurological problems. I have a long history and worked in different areas. I used to run a genetics institute at the University of Utah, where I was a professor. And then I was the director of the Huntsman Cancer Institute, also affiliated with the University of Utah. And all that time, we focused on research and then applying that research to develop new treatments, new diagnostic methods to alleviate suffering from cancer, heart disease, a variety of other problems. So that's been my passion for many years. I don't practice medicine any longer. I used to, and I miss practicing medicine, but the thrill of discovery and research is compelling as well. And ultimately, one runs into a conflict of how much time do you have, and can you really do a proper job as somebody's physician if you're going to be distracted with large research groups. Here at OMRF, for example, we have over 500 employees, 2/3 or more of whom are in the laboratory, more than that, 70% in the laboratory. So it's a pretty big undertaking. Well, I think what drew me was what draws most people who go into the research side, and it's curiosity. It's the single most important determinant of whether somebody's going to be successful in the field. Are you just curious about things? And it's typically things in general. And so people in our field, there's a misconception that scientists just go off in a lab by themselves and think great thoughts and so forth. It's actually not true. It's a pretty social enterprise. Okay, maybe not like an undergraduate fraternity or something, but it is pretty social. And people are driven by curiosity. You often see people like, well, how does that work? Or, how did that, or you hear that a lot. And it can be about almost anything, not just about whatever they're studying in the lab, but it can be about, a car or a new bicycle or toy or a gadget or something like that. They're curious about things. So that's really what it was. How do things work? How can we do them better? Medicine has improved enormously just in my professional career, just dramatic. I mean, I tell people that the death from heart attack and strokes has fallen by 2/3 in my professional career, and it's a stunning fact. But so there's been enormous advances in many parts of medicine. That's the good news. The bad news is there's still a long ways to go in almost every branch of medicine. People tend to think of cancer, comes to mind quickly. Again, I used to run a cancer institute. We made huge strides in how the number of cancers we can treat, some of which we can cure. But most all of us have experience with the flip side of that coin, which is, you or your loved one or somebody, family or friends have one of those where we haven't made so much progress, and that loved one didn't get the lucky break to be the type of patient that the new treatments really help. So there's long ways to go there, and the same is true in many other chronic disabling diseases. There's still a lot of room for improvement. So that's what's fun about it, and that makes people get up every day with new ideas and enthusiasm. When I was at a fairly early stage in my career, I had the opportunity to create a really innovative program within the medical school to take young scientists, actually we recruited from all over the country, all over the world actually, and bring them into a program that wasn't part of a department. It was separate from the traditional academic departments. I reported directly to the dean. But they would come from different departments, and the concept was to take advantage of unique resources in Utah that had been there for some time, and of a revolution in science. So that was just at the time of the Genome Project, and our ability to start studying genes in the genome in the laboratory on a big scale, right at the time that was starting. And we had an opportunity from a couple of funding sources. A major part of the funding came from Howard Hughes Medical Institute. Another came from a regional foundation in Salt Lake City. They gave us the money to build a beautiful new building and to have programmatic support to bring in these new scientists. And we thought that this revolution in genetics, or molecular genetics and molecular biology, had gone past a number of the departments in the medical school, many of which had had very storied history and research, but they'd gotten a little off the curve. They were doing sort of old-fashioned technology. Not every department, of course, but some of them, particularly clinical departments. And they thrived in days when it was possible to go out to the ward and draw a blood sample from a patient, take it back to your lab and measure something and draw a conclusion and make advances. Well, science had just changed. That was pretty much done by that time. So we thought, well, if we go out and recruit these young scientists and we'll bring them into this program, which has got this focus of using genetics and molecular biology to understand disease, it will provide strength to the institution, and then we'll give them employment for 5 years, and then at the end of that time, they'll go back to their home department. It always had to be a joint appointment with some department. So that was the idea, and it worked fantastically because we offered these people a really good opportunity. They could spend full time doing their research, or 90% of their time doing research, with generous support, and in a community of like-minded people. So it was quite an exciting time of all these really talented young people we recruited from all over with this common theme. And at that time, many advances were made. The Department of Human Genetics was also in the same building, and some fabulous scientists there made great discoveries on different types of cancer genes, and others. Scientists in the program I was running found genes for different heart problems, heart arrhythmias, heart failure, for seizure disorders, of many types of seizure disorders, for different reproductive problems, a long list of other cancer genes. So it's a very exciting time. And we had the opportunity to take advantage of both the big revolution in technology that was happening all over the world. I mean, the ability to sequence genes and to do it faster and faster and faster, cheaper and cheaper. And so that we were state of the art in that. We were one of the genome centers from the National Institutes of Health. But we had a unique asset that virtually nobody else had, and that really has to do with the history of Utah. So it was founded, the state was founded in the middle of the 19th century with one initial large immigration. Now I'm of course referring to people of European descent coming there. Of course there were always Native Americans in the region. But European-derived settlers came to Utah in the middle 19th century. It was part of a religious movement. These were members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons, who moved there in the mid-19th century. And so, unlike most places, one could define a date certain when sort of the city began, right? It started on this day, really, and with a certain population, and then went forward. Now, for a variety of religious reasons, members of the Mormon Church pay a lot of attention to their genealogy, and the church itself has been a major sponsor of genealogical studies and resources. So the greatest genealogical library in the world is in Salt Lake City. And it's not just limited to people of Mormon ancestry, but it's a generic genealogy library. And there are religious reasons why members of that church are obligated to understand that. But many years ago, prior to me taking over this genetics program, there had been a partnership formed from the university with the Mormon Church to give limited access to some of their private records that the church has, not the ones that are publicly available. But the definition was people who had a family member who'd been on that westward migration in the 19th century. And then to take that population and then bring it forward to contemporary time. So it was if you could go back and find these individuals, and now you're coming forward and seeing all of their descendants. Now you could sort of flip it around and look at the population as a cross-section, but then trace backwards. And because it was computerized, you could go forward or backwards either direction with equal facility. If you think about how you might have done your own genealogy, it's quite easy for you to go backwards now, right? You can say, well, that's my grandmother and then a great-grandfather, and work your way back to, and then you get to Burke's peerage and you're a queen or something, right? But you say, well, but what about that other branch of the family? There were 3 children back there, 5 generations back. What happened to their descendants? Well, you typically don't know and can't find that out, because the coming forward is the really hard part of that. So we had that. Right? So this had been a tremendous boom for genetics, because in trying to do some molecular genetics, you find people with a certain problem. So for example, I'll give you one in colon cancer. There was a type of colon cancer that was clearly inherited, and it's preceded by lots and lots of polyps in the colon, and they get cancer. And so this is an unusual thing. It's not the typical kind of colon cancer. And we could find in the population, here's a person who's got this syndrome, and here's another person. And they might not know each other or even know of each other or have any idea that they were related. But through our computerized genealogy, we could track them back and find that they had a common ancestor 3 generations back or something like that. Well, that gives you a presumption that they've inherited the same little tiny bit of DNA. Now, most of their DNA is going to be completely different because they're far enough apart that they don't share a lot of DNA, not like brothers and sisters. But that what they inherited in common was the same bit of DNA that caused their colon cancer. And that works really powerfully. So in genetic terms, that's called, then you go back into the family and see who has the gene and who doesn't. They go down these pathways, and that's called segregation. And it's really a very powerful tool to help you find these genes. So we were able to exploit that with all these different types of diseases and really get a lot of understanding into how genes cause disease. So we decided let's expand it, and it's worked so well. And then again, partnership with the state of Utah, we were able to incorporate all the public records, driver's licenses, birth certificates, marriage licenses, many, many other types of data sets were brought into that. And then so we could create a description of, for practical purposes, everybody in Utah. At one point, let's say in 2005 or so, we had everybody in Utah. And then, of course, in some branches, those who were derived from these Mormon pioneers. Now, everybody in Utah, there are a lot of people who aren't Mormons and aren't related to pioneers, right? So we had this sort of horizontal slice of them. And then for the people who'd been there for generations, we had this vertical slice that we could now have a very, very rich description of the population. And then, of course, that just enabled other types of studies that could be done for various health-related issues. It's an extraordinary resource. It's unparalleled. Certainly nothing in the United States is even remotely like it. Some places in Europe ultimately will have something similar, in part because they have better health records because of centralized health care in different countries. And of course, they have often a lot of genealogy and long history. They often don't have the large families and so forth that make the genetics really powerful, as Utah did. But there are several places in Europe that are going to have similar types of databases, strengths and weaknesses, but no place else in the United States that could ever do something like that, in my opinion. Well, once these tremendous resources had been assembled, we thought all along that they would be valuable for companies that were trying to develop new medications, new diagnostic tests, other types of treatments, because these inherited problems often give you insight into the more common variety. For example, there's a type of colon cancer that's preceded by polyps. Well, one of the groups at Utah discovered that that's due to a mutation in a certain gene. Now, the possibility was that that's a very rare thing. It only applies in these specialized families. It turns out that that very same gene is what gets damaged in almost every form of common colon cancer. About 70% of the time, it's that gene that puts you on the pathway to colon cancer, even though you don't come from a family with a risk. So in that case, it was tremendously instructive about almost all types of colon cancer. And the same is true with studies of epilepsy and heart arrhythmias, even though this patient who's got this heart problem now may not be from one of these families, didn't inherit a gene that caused that, they somehow got to that status through another route. So it's tremendously instructive about what pathways are important in causing disease. So we thought from the outset that this would be of interest, and it always has been to companies, and there's been some success in partnering with companies. What we failed to appreciate is that how to use these data sets is pretty subtle. I mean, it requires a particular kind of expertise, and we were one of the few places that had that expertise because it seemed natural to us, but for people who didn't have it, it wasn't an obvious how to proceed. So it didn't have as much traction with commercial partners as we thought it could or should. So as a result, we decided to start some efforts ourselves. And the logic was that a lot of these projects are purely or so-called, from an academic point of view, are too risky, or a fishing expedition. You're going out looking in general for something, which was true. I mean, it wasn't a precise hypothesis, right, that gene A will cause disease X. We didn't have that. It was a much more general idea, but turned out to be powerful. So we decided we'll start companies around different themes, and then at various times do contracts back with the University of Utah to have access to this data source. I should add that that data was very carefully protected. Access to it was controlled through a rigorous process to ensure ethical behavior and not divulging any secrets or anything like that. So that could never go out to a company, but the companies could have the right to come in and partner with scientists to get the derivatives from that data set. So we launched Lineagen really as a way to do that. And originally Lineagen was going to be the interface with all of those data sets for commercially related research. And it could have been in many different areas. But pretty quickly, because of the scientific success, Lineagen got focused in 2 or 3 areas, and the others left behind as far as any kind of active project. But that was the original idea. Commercial mechanism to take advantage of these unique assets because we thought it could really help change human health. So what's happened with Lineagen is we realized that one of the most powerful things that the genetics can do, yes, it can inform you about pathways and developing treatments, but right from the outset it can help with diagnostics or risk prediction. I may go back and forth. Besides diagnostics, it means that you have high cholesterol, or that you have a diagnosis based on a test. In these genetic tests, we typically don't do that. What we say, your genetic profile increases your risk for a certain thing, and it may increase it a little bit, it may increase it a lot, and we can typically say, roughly on that spectrum, if it's a little or a lot or in between. But it doesn't say that absolutely you'll necessarily have something. It means you're at higher risk of having something. Sometimes that risk you can moderate by a lifestyle change or so-called environmental effects, but that might be diet, cigarette smoking, exercise, all those things that can influence this. So there are examples of if you've got a certain gene, your risk is going to be higher if you do something unhealthy. If you don't do that thing, your risk comes back to normal. as compared to someone who didn't have that profile. So that's what we're talking about. And this can be tremendously helpful in putting people into these risk categories. And sometimes there's action that can be taken. And that's really where we got so deeply into autism. Because the issue there is that children with developmental delay, and the autism is one form of developmental delay, and there are other genetic causes and others that cause this. And that means that they're slow to talk, they're maybe slow to walk, they don't interact with their environment in the way that a child typically does. But we know that there's a huge delay in when you get to a final diagnosis that this child has autism or is on the autism spectrum, or maybe has one of these other related genetic disorders. And that can be on the order of 2.5 years. And many people have had this experience. Well, the parents think there's something abnormal. The pediatrician maybe is not so sure. Let's check it again in 3 months or 6 months, check up. Then, yeah, we all agree that there's something. Well, let's try this. Well, let's get an appointment with a developmental specialist or with a geneticist or a neurologist. And then the process begins, then some testing. But so it's often quite a long delay. And the tragedy of that is that it's now quite well established that even without any new medications, children with autism really benefit from dramatic early intervention of behavioral therapy, of just trying to help them cope and adapt to a social situation through human interaction, very intensive. And it's really a remarkable success. It doesn't work for every child. Some children have a dramatic response. The average is improved, and some are dramatically improved. But it's an important therapy. It's life-changing for many of these children. And it does help them all realize their maximum potential, which is really what we're after here. Take children who have a challenge that they have to deal with and try to ensure that they can be the best they can be. So to do that, they have to get in these structured programs as early as possible. And that's also proven. Early is the key to it. After a certain age, they have much, much less impact. Okay, now you've got this real problem. There's an effective intervention, this behavioral therapy, but you have to start it early. Yet there's a delay in diagnosis. So that's where we focused our effort. Help these parents and the physicians, help them get to a diagnosis by providing them this information about genetic risk. So that will dramatically color if you see, oh yes, this is a child who has a genetic profile that strongly suggests that they're at risk of autism and they have these other behaviors. Okay, we can make a diagnosis of autism now. Now, the company doesn't make that diagnosis, the physician does, but we provide information that really helps them stratify that. Now, in some cases, and we have examples of this, we do the test and you get a completely different diagnosis of something that looks kind of like autism, and also has developmental delay, but it has a different name and sometimes has very different interventions. Sometimes these children are at risk for seizures, for example, or blindness is another one. And so you can start them on another type of treatment, either medication or other types of treatment to help with those other potential problems. So the goal of Lineagen became use genetic insights into the risk of autism to help get these children into treatment earlier, by getting the information earlier, accelerate that process that leads to a diagnosis so they can get in treatment quickly. And then we have another program in multiple sclerosis. Now, okay, seems like completely unrelated. It probably is unrelated in a sort of mechanistic sense. But from a procedural point of view, it's similar. If you have friends or loved ones who've had a diagnosis of MS, it's typically a long process from the first symptoms to a diagnosis of MS. And so we again think that this is another opportunity to help accelerate that diagnostic process. And as you probably know, there are a lot of really good medications for MS now. And at least it's plausible to think that if they're started early, that you're going to get a better outcome, prevent disability, and help people maintain a healthy, functioning life by doing that. So same idea. It's it's behind our autism project with respect to commercialization. Scientifically, it's quite robust, but we're not to the stage of a clinical product as we are for autism now. I think for me, the real attraction to creating Lineagen was something of an intellectual one. Yes, there was an emotional element in that, and at various times that's been involved as well. But I really thought that using these unique tools would change how diagnosis and treatment of illnesses came about. So I thought it really was, let's go push this as far as we can and see if we can't make this into something that's useful to treat patients with. So it was that more than anything else. I think for both for me, I have a cousin with autism, but that didn't drive our decision about to pursue autism. That was really a scientific decision. We had this wonderful findings. We had tools that we were confident could help people. It was really kind of a bonus to the group that it turns out to be something that's as compelling, emotionally compelling as autism. With children who are struggling, families who are struggling, and being able to help them. So it really, I guess in a way it was fortunate for the company because it made people really passionate and committed. The people working at Lineagen aren't there just to get paychecks. They're late at night and determined to make this successful in a business sense, because if we're not successful in a business sense, we can't help people. So it really has become a labor of love, but I'd say that was more luck. I mean, we could have had something that wouldn't be as nearly as compelling. In a predecessor of Lineagen, we actually had some fabulous scientific data about psoriasis. Okay, well, psoriasis is a serious problem, and we were pleased to be able to help people with psoriasis, but it's not as compelling as autism. So that we didn't plan that. We didn't pick it for that reason. We picked it because scientifically it worked, and then of course the other is the medical necessity of an unmet need was compelling. So it's I guess it's not as romantic as it might be, but it really was a sort of an intellectual analysis, good science, unmet medical need. This is the one. Yeah, the topic of autism, of course, has been much in the news really for years now, but even more recently with this really remarkable report from the Center for Disease Control of an even higher estimate of the incidence of autism in our society. And of course, this is a troubling finding, and something of a puzzle. And I do get asked now and then, since our test is focused on the genetics, well, how does this fit? Well, let me just back up by saying that the studies are compelling, and many, many studies in all different populations, that there's a huge genetic factor behind autism, the risk of autism. That's just a fact. But you say that doesn't completely fit with the fact that it appears that the incidence of autism is going up, because our genetic risk is going to be fixed in a population, at least over any kind of short period. I mean, the genes aren't changing that much. So how can the risk go up? Well, there are two reasons for that. One is, and some of this is true, is just we have better detection now. People are more aware, children get diagnosed, and so forth. So that's definitely part of this. I think it's also likely that the absolute incidence has gone up. And that probably means that there's something in our life experience, what is often called environment, that meshes with this genetic risk to give the disease. And that something about that is more prevalent now than it used to be. What that is unknown as far as I can tell. There's, could it be diet? Could it be something? It could be any one of many things. I think it's going to be very hard to find what that is. Just typically in these types of scientific studies, finding things in our environment that we can unequivocally show lead to chronic health problems has just been a frustrating process. It really just hasn't worked very well. And then what we're going to have to fall back on is sort of standard recommendations. Eat a healthy diet and do sensible things and don't smoke cigarettes. Well, that's not for autism, but in general, I'm talking about healthy behaviors to enforce that. Meanwhile, with these children, rather than dwell on exactly what's doing that, we've got to get the children help. I mean, and get them the best we can do now. Obviously, those other issues will be important if we think there's something we can go alter so that we'll reduce the burden in the future, so that other children won't have that. I'm not making light of the importance of that. It's just that I don't think we have any compelling insights into that right now. So our focus is on what's their risk. I mean, did they get a set of genes that increases their risk? And if we can tell them that, then that will help the physician diagnose them earlier and get them treatment earlier. So that's where our position is. Obviously, anything we can do to help on the other side or to inform studies of what else is going on, we want to do that. But it's not our area of expertise, and we're going to bring the part that we think is actionable now, and that can form a basis for really important changes in how these children are managed and cared for. And in our case, and build a strong business that can help us pursue that mission. If we don't build a strong business, we won't be able to deliver that kind of care to people. There are a lot of other controversies in autism, and we tend to pay attention to what the issues are and what type of research is being done, whether it strikes us as compelling or relevant to what we're delivering with respect to the genetic risk. But we're not have active research programs in all those other areas. As we began talking with pediatricians and then specialists that they might refer to about how they would use a tool such as the one we provide for genetic risk in these children, we were pleased to find tremendous acceptance of it. It's interesting, there were two different reasons. I think that the general pediatrician who sees, is going to have an office full of children for anywhere from, well baby checkups to preschool checkups to a child with an acute illness of some sort, and everything, very busy general practice there in pediatrics. They don't see many kids with autism. Of course, given the increasing incidence, they're going to see some, but it's not their usual patient. And they often don't know what to do next. It's a challenge. I'm not being critical. In a certain sense, no one knows what to do next. It's often bad news for the parents. People don't really want to talk about this. Is there something not quite right with my child? Pediatrician may have detected it, but can't quite engage the patient. So it's a tough problem to deal with in a busy pediatric practice, because there are other kids, and okay, I know what to do with that kid. I'm going to give them penicillin for the, and so this one, it's disruptive to their workflow. It takes a lot of time. It's emotionally draining. The children themselves can be very difficult to deal with because they'll get agitated and just hard to control. Things like something as straightforward. Well, not straightforward, but how difficult it can be with any child to get a blood sample, right? It's traumatic. It hurts. They don't like it. And so typically for these autistic kids, that's just multiplied many-fold. So they can be very disruptive to a practice. So I'd say that our major message we got back was frustration. Like, what to do now? How do I help them? It's just a frustrating thing. They knew that they would want to get them referred to either somebody specialized in developmental issues or genetic issues or neurological perhaps. There's often a delay in getting that there. They weren't sure where the workflow was that you do a test. When we said, well, what if we had a test? They said, I don't want a test. It's just something else that I can't deal with, right? What they wanted was an action plan, right? So it's really why we evolved our approach, which is both the testing, but it's also genetic counseling. It's also a detailed report. It's a suggestion for next steps. So a busy practicing pediatrician can have this, and of course we don't dictate what to do. The parents and the pediatrician have to ultimately decide that, but we lay out essentially with this, suggest the following, and then you might still pursue this idea of a referral and so forth. So it was very welcome because it was designed to address the problem that the parents of this child and the pediatrician were dealing with. We try to bring a solution to a problem, right? Not just another lab test. Now with the specialists, it's a little bit different issue because of course they're used to dealing. They've got, their office is full of children with this or similar problems. So they're much more accustomed to dealing with these problems, just as a cardiologist would be with a heart arrhythmia or something like that, right? So they were used to that. What they like is that it's first off, the technical quality of our test is unsurpassed, and very soon we'll launch another further version that will be unique test with lots of different genetic insights that no other company will have. So, but we bring a very comprehensive report, much more detailed than other providers in this area. And for them, it tremendously accelerates what they can do for these children. If they've had it before they get there, they have actual information at the time they see the patient and meet with the parents, so that it again facilitates the implementation of whatever treatment is going to be undertaken, because we're sort of doing processes in parallel rather than in series, right? So it's not referred, stop, get a test, come back, and so forth. We've accelerated that, and so we've had equally enthusiastic adoption from specialists, but really for a slightly different reason. But it's been gratifying that we feel like we've helped at both levels of getting to a diagnosis, and obviously that's important because our whole intent is to speed up the time to get to earlier diagnosis for these children to get them in treatment. Most insurance companies now have recognized the value of genetic testing in developmental delay. It's mandated as the standard of care by the various professional bodies, including the medical geneticist associations. It's under discussion in the Pediatric Association. We believe it'll be an official recommendation of this should be done in every child with developmental delay. To try to find a variety of problems. As I said, there are a number of specific, unusual or rare diseases that we pick up on our tests that aren't strictly autism, but can be confused with it during the initial evaluation stages. And sometimes those are important, as I said, because they can have seizures or risk of blindness and other problems that need separate attention. But so this has been a very strongly adopted, recommended part of the evaluation through various professional organizations. And most insurance companies have recognized the value of that. Yes, it's an expensive test, but we have a compelling argument, I believe, that the aggregated cost drops because now you get them into treatment sooner, they do better, and the other part of it is that by doing a comprehensive test from the outset, you avoid this issue of test A and then some result, and so you test B and another result, and so forth and so on. And when you aggregate those costs, it can be more than ours, and all the delay that's built into that. So, yes, it's an expensive test because we measure hundreds of thousands of data points and interpret them and so forth. But it's one that adds a lot of value and has had widespread acceptance. Now, yes, there's sometimes that insurance companies will demand additional information, but most of them have really dealt with this issue and know of its value. If it's appropriately done, the recommendations come out, and the physician incorporates it into their diagnosis. It's one that's been well accepted. I'd say that Lineagen so far is still small enough that most insurance companies wouldn't say, oh yeah, those guys are great. So they really respond to more the description of the test, the technical description of the test, and so that's really what they do. Now, I think there are cases where these companies have looked into our tests and the quality of the product, and the comments have been very favorable. But we're not a small enough company that for a large insurance company wouldn't know our name. They would know the name of very large laboratory companies, but not us in general. So I think it's because most of them have guidelines for what general type of testing should be done, and we fall within those guidelines and make our case. So, but mostly then we try to make our case of our superiority of our product to the physicians, to either the specialist or the general pediatrician. And I think that's appropriate because they're the ones that would have to decide among their several tests or several companies available for this. Now, we argue that with our current test, somebody could conduct the same type of test. We believe that our reporting is superior to anybody else, so that you get more from the test. But within the next few weeks, we'll be launching our so-called second generation test, which will be a proprietary test that will be unique and far superior to anything else in the marketplace. But we tend to make that case with the pediatricians directly because they're used to thinking, comparing the technical and scientific merit of the different approaches. Yeah, so Lineagen began really as a science-focused company. Now, and of course, it's been due to success. There's now a commercial component to that. I mean, always the anticipated outcome would be a commercial clinical component where, of that interface with the consumer, customer, patient, and the physician. But its origins really are in science, and so its own research that's conducted in partnership with the University of Utah has led to a number of discoveries of finding genes that weren't previously known to predispose to autism that its scientists discovered. So real leading efforts in that. And of course, that was the idea, to use these unique resources, new tools, to go create this body of discoveries. That, of course, becomes intellectual property, which can be a number of different things. But in the case of Lineagen now, I'd say there's largely two areas. One is a lot of patents that cover these different genes. The second is sort of a know-how, or trade secrets, if you will. So these can be equally valuable. I mean, well, it's, the formula for Coca-Cola, there's no patent on that, but it's still pretty valuable intellectual property, right? So there is some know-how with respect to how we integrate information from these different genes to come up with real recommendations. And those will continue to thrive. In addition, Lineagen partnered with the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, CHOP, one of the leading organizations in the world in childhood diseases, and particularly genetics of childhood disease, and big autism projects there that we've joined with them collaboratively. And again, we have exclusive license to all of the markers or genes that they've discovered. So that intellectual property forms the basis for this proprietary chip that we will start selling tests based on that chip very soon. By that, it means that other people can't report against those findings. I mean, they're available in the literature, but they won't be able to use them in a commercial sense to create a test. So it gives us a very powerful strategic advantage of, there are insights to this disease that we'll have that no one else will have. We believe, we'll have to finish the studies, but just we can calculate that our yield from our test will go up substantially, between 2 and 3-fold, so that we'll have a much more informative test than any of our competitors, either now or in the future. And then the second issue is this: there will always be things that we won't divulge in a patent or publicly, but how we operate to integrate some of those issues. We have the same sort of approach in our two other programs. One other program is in multiple sclerosis. It shares something in common with autism, which is that we believe that a delay in diagnosis is an important problem in MS, and that you could help people with MS by shortening that, and that our genetic test could help with that. So again, we have research studies that Lineagen has conducted with other organizations, with the University of Utah. We're beginning a project here at the Oklahoma Medical Research Foundation in collaboration with Lineagen. That project will be funded by an organization called Fast Forward, which is sort of a venture firm that's affiliated with the National Multiple Sclerosis Society. So they've come in to help finance that project because of their excitement about the various genetic components that we've discovered. Again, those are protected by patents and the same sort of approach. Lineagen has a third research area in chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. The logic here is a little bit different. There sometimes is a problem diagnosing it, but typically not so much. But this one has to do with being able to predict different trajectories of the disease and when and where to intervene based on these genetic patterns. Obviously, that's of an example that I mentioned earlier of gene-environment interaction. Well, in that case, the environmental factor is typically cigarette smoking, which of course is bad, but not always. I mean, some people with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease have bad asthma, and so it can be other types of environmental. So that's the flavor there. But in all of the different research programs, we're very careful to protect the value of those by patenting genes and or sometimes processes, but other times some of the processes are maintained in a so-called trade secret mode to give us that competitive advantage in the marketplace. Now, from a humanitarian point of view, we want to make sure that this is always available for patients. We would never try to keep somebody from having it, but the logic is that test should be available from us, and that we'll provide it at a fair price to them and for the insurance companies. I have been asked at times about the best patenting of human genes and human gene patterns. It's been much in the news recently, a couple of Supreme Court decisions. One decision had to do with a company that had a test that would predict some responsiveness to a medication. And the Supreme Court, in a very narrow sense, said that what was covered in that patent was, or the patent was improperly issued, because what they claimed as an invention really was a discovery. So this is a very important distinction in patent law. A discovery, which where scientists are happy to make discoveries. I've found some new scientific principle, but patent law does not discover discoveries. It protects inventions. Right? So I have invented a telephone or a whatever, and so the issue of things that involve with the natural world have been problematic. How do you decide when something is just a phenomenon of nature, or that there's been enough insight or reconfiguring it to call it an invention? And that's what the court dealt with. And they decided in this case, this one company, that the patent did not meet that definition. There was a second case waiting, or had petitioned for a Supreme Court hearing. The Supreme Court didn't hear that case, but told the lower court to reconsider its decision. The lower court had upheld its patent. It said, reconsider your decision in light of our more recent finding. Now, I think, and friends of mine who are patent experts all think, that patent is going to be upheld, that it is fine. But the court just said reconsider it in view of this other. So many of Lineagen's patents all would fall in this category. We still believe are going to be fine. They're going to be upheld and enforced and so forth. We have other types of patents that certainly will be. And then, as I said, finally, we have trade secrets that we can protect just because we won't tell people about them. So we're confident that we're going to be fine with respect to the protection of our intellectual property portfolio. But I know it's much in people's minds these days, and a lot of appropriate concern about exactly what's going to happen in the legal system. But we feel very confident, and all of our advisors tell us that. Lineagen, first and foremost, is a science-based company of innovative discoveries and inventions about how to improve healthcare. Now, our most commercial product is for evaluation of developmental delay in autism spectrum disorders. And the goal there is to provide tools for physicians and parents to make this diagnosis and to get those children treated so that their lives can be enriched, they can achieve their utmost, and in some cases be cured. That's the goal of those tests. We have other projects that will have similar goals outside of autism, but that's the one that's commercially relevant. And it's turned into a passion for the people. So not only is it a great business opportunity, because I'll talk about the potential cash flows there from sales of tests, but it's a mission of human rewards as well. So not only is there a financial reward, there's a human thrill of doing good for people. The business itself is compelling. So one of the hottest areas in the last few years has been so-called molecular diagnostics. This is sort of the ultimate molecular diagnostic of being able to find these very complex gene patterns and talk about the risk that this child will have autism from that pattern. They're reimbursed at a very high rate. I don't probably ought to talk to General Counsel about whether I can say a forward-looking statement, but the company has far exceeded its financial pro forma with respect to reimbursed price per test. And this is a very expensive test in the thousands of dollars. And we have a financial pro forma and we've been well above that for over a year now. So the business model is strong with respect to the reimbursement rates. Sales growth has been terrific. Adoption by specialists in the field, real thought leaders, or for primary care pediatricians really pretty much equally across the board with enthusiastic adoption. So we believe it's simply a matter of growing this business now. We're really at a stage of looking for growth equity at this point. For the autism part of it, the great bulk of the discovery is over. Some of it has to be refined, and of course we'll always be researching through our own internal database and continue to improve the product. But the real discovery work is pretty much done. And the use of capital really now is growth capital to build this into a really thriving commercial operation.
Excellent. So you kind of like this product?
This is a great product. It really is. I mean, what we need are some of the parents and physicians who've gotten our reports who just rave about how helpful it is to them. I mean, because again, it wasn't designed to be a lab test. It was designed to be a solution to a problem. And that, ultimately, we believe we're an information company. We're not a lab test company. We're an information company. What information can we give back to those parents and those physicians that help them help the patient? One of the keys to our product being successful, or tests, if you will, is that we do have this comprehensive approach to how we deal with the families and the physicians. So we don't just send them a letter, or yes or no, or 17.4. No, it goes into some detail. First off, because genetic risk is not a straightforward thing to understand, right? It's risks and ratios and so forth. So to be accurate in scientific terms, which we insist on, is hard to convey and to people who aren't sophisticated in not just autism, but in the mathematics of risk assessment and probabilities and so forth. So we felt that we had to have a way to do that everyone could understand. So that's why we put in our effort to have genetic counseling, to have actually genetic specialist, physician geneticist available to talk to the doctor, to go into real detail. Other companies have done something similar, and there was another company that was in the cancer space. It was a consultation, a test and consultation company, not so much with patients, but with the physicians. So it really derived from our plan, really derived from this insight we got from talking to these physicians about what's the problem. What problem do they need to solve? Does that physician need to solve in his or her office? What are the parents trying to achieve here, right? And what can we do to help that? So we recognize that, just getting back the kind of lab reports you get for your blood cholesterol wasn't going to help, right? And it's going to be too complicated. And that doesn't tell you what to do next, either or give you suggestions. Not tell you, but give you suggestions about what means next. So that's why we really developed the plan, and we'll always continue to work on that plan. Are we doing the best we can? Do we need to make tweaks on it? And we've got really wonderful, passionate, dedicated people doing it, which is what really helps. One of the most gratifying things with respect to how we approach this is that as we learn more information for either publications in the scientific medical literature or things from our own internal research because we'll find new things on the chips that are informative, right, that we didn't know before. And so it's a dynamic process. Well, just in the last few weeks, we found one of those. So a study that had been done months ago now has a new result, simply because new information has come in, and we retest we don't retest the chips, we just resurvey the information that came from the chips. We say, we have a new finding for this child. Call the physician, our team called the physician, talked to the parents, and it was one actionable one. I mean, this is one where they needed to take some steps, not exactly related to the autism part of it, but it came out of the same chip. So it's based on that relationship with the physician and the patient family that we would update them. So it'd be as if you had your cholesterol measured a year ago, and now you get another phone call and say, well, you know what, we just ran a little bit better test, and we decided it's not quite as, not rerun the test, not do another test, but reevaluate the data from the old tests, and you get new information. So it's an ongoing process, and it really all depends on this relationship that our people develop in talking to them. So it's a crucial part of what we think we provide to them. When I say that I think that we're an information company, that one test will continue to yield results for years, because every time we learn more about what genes are involved in autism or developmental delay, that will just automatically enrich the findings of all of them that have been done previously. So it's a really sort of a living test, if you will. I mean, it continues to generate results on into the future.